Another turn of the wheel, another book done. Hey everyone, and welcome back to my studying. Done with The Great Hunt, the second book. So let's review it, shall we? Um, Thankfully, I'm on vacation starting from today, so I'll have much more time reading. So I guess majority of my time will be spent in Jordan's work. And now, first segment of my review. What I expected. What I expected. I expected that the book will start at roughly the same point as the last one ended, since this is the second one in the series. Um, I did not expect many time jumps since we're still fairly early in the um, overall development, especially Rand's development. So yeah, I also expected less reliance on the framework that was used in the previous book, the framework that used the Fellowship of the Ring as sort of a blueprint for the kickoff for the series. Especially with how Eye of the World ended, I expected it to go away pretty much entirely. I also expected more time dedicated to other characters, especially female characters like Nynaeve, Egwene, Elaine, characters who are not Taviran. I expected major conflicts, or at least some conflicts, outside of the main good versus evil fight. I also expected more insights and details into Tar Valon and just how teachings go there, more details about Ogier, and I also expected to find out a bit more about the Aiel that we hear some things about, but not much, not in the first book. I also expected a less standalone ending because when I finished Eye of the World, I really enjoyed how it ended. It ended well. It did not wrap everything, but it did so sufficiently that I could have just stopped there and be satisfied. It was a complete experience. Now, with The Great Hunt, I did not expect this to be the case. And one last point that I expected was um, more character development for Matt, specifically because he was one of my least favorite characters in the first book. Next segment, what I got in contrast to what I expected. I got a direct continuation of the first book. It pretty much started almost at the same point on which the last one ended. And there were some major repercussions from the ending. The discovery, retrieval of the horn, and the curse of the mat was still very much a factor, a driving force of the narrative. I also got a time jump, which I did not expect, with a little caveat that the time jump was not super big, but it did occur later in the book. Also, what I expected kind of came true. Great Hunt did ditch the Lord of the Rings framework almost entirely, unless you want to stretch the definition of framework a bit and draw some parallels for the hunt, the search for the horn as a parallel for One Ring, which I wouldn't do personally. Um, More time was dedicated to other female characters and some of the new ones, even. I think Min was a very welcome addition to the cast. I also got conflicts that were not entirely driven by dark versus evil conflict. The Shonchan were a new faction that had their own goals, which were not directly connected to the fantastically evil Dark One. I also got some more Tarvalon info. Maybe it's not as much as I'd like, but still enough to be uh, engaging. Uh, Also, I got more information about the Ogier. The studying was great. We find more about their culture. For example, their marital traditions are super different as opposed to human marital traditions. The Ogier males have pretty much no choice into their um, spouse. They are kind of paraded through the setting, and the female Ogier choose them. Also, very little piecemeal information was given about the Aiel. Some technically to count, but not all that much, not yet. And the thing that I expected to happen did not happen. Matt did not get that much development until the very end, in my opinion. Next segment will be what I liked. And there is a lot to like in this book. It was generally well paced. And I know that pacing is such a dubious word to describe a book, but let's just say the flow was not egregiously interruptive. It the chapters were evenly paced, evenly matched, so that was a good thing. And it also focused a bit more on the plot than on the characters overall, which is not a bad thing. Um, Also, one specific scene, well, two scenes that were kind of similar that I really enjoyed. There was a scene with a time stone, with a portal stone, and it's a scene after which a time jump happened. But before the time jump, Rand and others are kind of sort of stuck in this loop of parallel lives. They keep reliving what if scenarios. What would happen if Rand kind of became a soldier and went out to serve in the army, or what would happen if he had to be gentled, and so on and so forth. And the writing in this passage, and the writing in a passage that occurred very early in the book with the flies and the time resetting in one of the ravaged houses, was very effective. Every once in a while, Robert Jordan will hit you with a very chilling, very effective passage. It kind of comes out of nowhere, but it's very in your face, very, very well done. Another thing I liked was most of the female cast received more time on the pages, especially Nynaeve and even Moraine. Moraine to the lesser extent, but still there were some tidbits about her time as an apprentice in Tarvalon, and it was enough to give them some much needed depth, I think. And Nynaeve did receive some. She certainly was one of my favorite characters, but Robert Jordan expands a bit on that part. We also find out some of more Tarvalon's inner workings, behind the door, politics, infighting, things like that. Since I wanted to find out more about the Ogier and their culture, Robert Jordan heard my plea and he delivered on that front. I received exactly what I wanted. We know more about their culture. The chapter we spent in their studying was delightful. There was a lot of insight into their day-to-day lives, the kind of a status of steadings, what they are. They're sort of this neutral ground. It was all I wanted and more. Next point is a bit more neutral. I still know very little about the Aiel, but enough information was given to me that I am just eager and psyched to know more. And my last point was character moments. Character moments and character development, such as specifically Inktar. The whole arc that he received was very well done, executed well. His whole internal struggle. Well, to be fair, we do not find that he has an internal struggle through the majority of the book, but through the dialogue, through some of the observations of other characters, such as the observations of Varen and her behavior toward him. There is this internal struggle that has a payoff in the end, and I want to compliment Robert Jordan on that front. Now, less pleasant things. What I did not care for. I don't want to contradict myself, so here it goes. I did praise the greater focus on the plot this time, but I also found it lacking. What I mean is, to be more specific, the trajectory of it, the way it was done, was a bit redundant. Hear me out. So, here was the sort of a pattern, the main driving flow of the narrative. So, the gang finds the horn. The gang then promptly loses the horn and the dagger, which was very important. Then the gang is in pursuit of the horn and the dagger, the eponymous hunt. The gang then retrieves dagger and horn. Then the gang loses both the horn and the dagger to Dark Friends again. Then the gang is in pursuit of the horn and the dagger again. And in the end, spoilers, the gang retrieves both. And what I mean is, in sort of meta-narrative sense, there is this thing such as, it's colloquially known as MacGuffin. MacGuffin is an item. It doesn't have to be a magical item. It doesn't have to have any kind of properties. It's just a driving point for the characters, for the plot. In Lord of the Rings, it is the One Ring. The One Ring is the MacGuffin. The main characters want to destroy it and bring it to a place where it is destroyed. The main bad guy wants to retrieve it. It is the most important thing in the story because everyone has motivation to have it. And here, and usually in most of the stories when they are done well, there is one MacGuffin, because otherwise the motivations kind of became muddy. Here we have two MacGuffins. We have the horn, which we find out is a very powerful, very important item. It can summon the heroes of old, and if it falls into wrong hands, um, it can mean a disaster. So we have a large scale threat that depends on this item. Then we have the dagger, which is a much lesser scale item, but it's equally critical because one of the main characters will suffer an awful fate. He will die, Matt in this case, if he does not get this dagger that was stolen back. So having both of them to be stolen each and every time was very much redundant in my sense, because if we have either of those things gone, we still have a strong incentive to succeed, for our protagonist to achieve their goal. If the dagger is lost, Matt dies. If the horn is blown by someone else than our protagonists, someone with bad intentions, the world essentially ends. And also, I was a bit kind of frustrated with this development because I expected, with Matt being on a short sort of timeline, to grow as a result, to be even a bit more humble, but the Robert Jordan's insistence that he blows the horn at the end was not that well earned, in my opinion. But that's kind of my main problem with the book. Some of the minor ones were, while the time in Tar Valon was generally well spent, I think the exception was Egwene. She was pretty bland for the most part. I wish she had more agency as a character, because it seems like things are happening to her as opposed to her being in the driving force for things to happen. And one of my complaints, which are ironically probably also getting redundant, it is both sad and puzzling, I think, that Ingtar, who was for all the purposes a minor character, but his reveal that he was someone with bad intentions and had a will to redeem himself, and he added this moral gray area that we previously did not know, that someone who was on a dark side had the capacity to pursue the light. He was a great character, but a minor one, and he showed more growth, more development than Matt, who is a member of the main trio. I don't think that the fact that Matt got to blow the horn at the end, I don't think it served as character development. I don't think it was set up that way. Maybe I'm wrong. That's how I feel. I felt this was just more of, this is story branching out away from Rand so that other ta'veren has something else to do, because Perrin did use the banner of Lewis Terran, which was awesome for Perrin, but Perrin was already an interesting character, and I still find Matt to be one note. One last sort of negative that I have is, and I promise I'll try to omit this in the future if this continues, because I'm getting boring and redundant again, since this is a department of redundancy department, apparently. I mentioned earlier that conlanging, the construction of languages, of fictional languages, was not one of the strongest suits of Robert Jordan. But I also mentioned that while his constructed phrases and sentences were not too great, Some of his naming schemes, like names of places, people, cities, were well done. But I feel like it got worse here. In a previous video, I think chapters 40 to 50, I mentioned that there was this one point where this unpronounceable monstrosity with 4 apostrophes that was just one syllable away from being a parody, if it was not already a parody. And I just, every time I see this in any majority of fantasy, when I see a constructed language, when it's done sloppily, or it doesn't have to be sloppy, just without proper structure, my eyes just glaze over. I roll my eyes. It just instantly takes me out of the story. And here it was not done in the greatest way. I have the utmost respect for Robert Jordan's skills in character development, Matt notwithstanding, with plotting, with world building, especially with battle scenes. I read that he was a Vietnam War vet, and he served in the military. He fought in wars, and I could clearly see it. I felt it was authentic, and all these things are something that he does well. But conlanging are definitely not his strength, and I hope that he tones it down in the future installments. Um, so yeah, final thoughts. Um, in part, just in part, not in world building aspects, just in the main narrative. It was predictable in some ways at larger scale, but I still think this was absolutely worth it. Um, I am still riding that high. I'm still enjoying this very much. The ending was bombastic. The payoff was absolutely there. It delivered 100%. And if Robert Jordan can keep up the ante in the following books, I don't see myself stopping until I finish it all. So thank you for watching and see you in Dragon Reborn. Bye.